Conflict Radio. Done. Up. There we go. How's that, everybody? No audio. Well, there should be audio now. I guess welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is November 15th, 2021. Sorry, guys. I always forget to hit that button sometimes. And I guess I got a shout out again to everybody who's here. I just did it, but we'll do it again. I see Angel and Jesus Christ here. Distorted Reality. Sapphire Elf. Vash Wolfwood. King of Huku Mundu is here. Jared Jaguar. Blue Chicken, welcome back. Not Quite Human. Akram Musa. The Happy Plague Doctor. Gordo Two Shoes. James Smith. Let's see. I'm going to scroll up some more. Rogue Ways. She is our guest today, Rogue Ways. So if you see her in the chat, say hello. And make sure you check out the link to her YouTube channel is in the description box below. So make sure you click on that and get over to subscribe. Scrolling up, see who else is here. Mary Kay is here. I see Hank Stolk and Ian myself. I think I said that. Magnus Zetterquist, Chuck Bam, David Ferguson. How is everybody? Also, Johnny Dazzles. Conflict, you probably said something cool, but no one heard it. I did say something cool. It was everybody's name, and I just redid it all. Lee Palace is also here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conflict Radio. So let's get on with it. Today's guest is Lindsey Scharmyn, and she has struggled through healing from severe childhood trauma and came back transformed in order to bring transformative teaching and healing to students of public school and now to students and fans of her shows, Rogue Ways and Middle Path. She offers spiritual services, healing, blessings, courses, and orgone and crystal jewelry to empower people to uplift and heal themselves. She is an author of 5 books and counting, a master teacher, a video, a podcast show, host, and spiritual guide, and an experiencer of other realms and states of consciousness. She aims to continue uplifting all of herself in order to uplift all of the world. Lindsey Scharmyn, welcome to Conflict Radio. How are you today?
I am so good, Michael. It's so awesome to be here with you and all your amazing fans out in the chat. I'm very, very stoked. And it is getting cold and a little bit dark, as you were saying in the intro. I'm not sure if it was the intro or if everyone heard or if it was the other one. But it is getting kind of darker and colder and the leaves are falling and winter is coming. But I also really hope that everyone out there keeps it in their heart and mind to make a bright winter because they want a dark winter and we don't have to go along with that plan. We can make it a bright winter for ourselves and everyone around us. So that's my invitation to everybody listening.
Yeah, all right. So let's talk about it. Out of the shadows and into the light. We're going to talk about, I guess, casting aside evilness and coming to the light. Let me run this by you real quick so we can get it out of the way. It says here that you were a surviving and recovering from communism, being an agitator and member of the Revolutionary Communist Party USA. So you used to, I guess, be in the darkness, right?
Oh yeah, the deep darkness on so many levels. You know, it was emotional, and it started in childhood, as so many traumas do, and it followed me throughout. I had a lot of rocky road of drug use and other things growing up, and you know, when I got into college, communism sounded real nice, and it and it really did. You know, and I'm a good person at heart, and most people are, and that's what's so hard about communism is it really calls to the best aspects of us and our compassion and wanting to help one another. And it turns that and twists it all around. And so you really think you're doing something good for people, and who doesn't want to do something good for people? So it was a pretty, just like any devil, it was full of temptation.
All right, so let's talk about what brought you to support communism in your younger days. Do you feel as if it was taught to you? Were they pushing it in your school system? Were they how did you even come up with the idea that this was a good idea?
Yeah, it really wasn't taught as overtly as it is now. Now it seems like it's in even our grade schools. But in colleges, it is a lot more embedded in the curriculum, and a lot of the teachers have a sort of communist bent, and so it definitely is there. It's just kind of around, and you're not invited to it as communism necessarily. You're invited to look at class struggle, and you're invited to look at class differences, and you're invited to look at oppression and the history of oppression and all of these different angles. And you're not told that that's communist or socialist ideology when it's being presented to you. Sometimes you are, if you're in a class about that. But a lot more often it's presented in these other ways. You're sort of getting, your toes dipped into it. But the student body was radicalized. There's always student groups that are socialist, communist, and everywhere in between, anarchist, all sorts of things. And so that was really my entrance into it. And I'll have to point out that my sister actually was way more into it than I was, and she still is. And so she also invited me into communism. So that didn't help, that my sister, who I love and look up to, she's a little bit older, was into it, but she was radicalized into it by a student organization on her college campus as well. Totally different college, totally different campus. So it is everywhere. It's definitely in our colleges, and that was by design. We can go back to Yuri Brezmenov, or however you say his name, talking about how, that was a communist plot to come into the United States and infiltrate every organization and our schools and our school boards and all these different areas, and just start to degrade everything and to present these ideologies and convince people they were good. So it's not that surprising that it is so saturated now. It is really sad, and it's definitely not good.
So you talk about how they infiltrate, I guess, our schools and institutions, and even I guess on banks and politics and everything else. It's really it's just their money, right? They're doing what they're told because they're getting money from the communists, correct?
I would guess so. I mean, when I look back at the people who were actually communist members and they were in the party and they were higher ups in the party, they had to be, right? Because there's no reason. When I look back and I see, I'm sure some of them didn't even really believe in anything that we were doing, but they were happy to lead us all into this pit. And so there has to be someone funding it, and there has to be agents at some level. I think the rest of the people are just useful idiots, just like we see everywhere, where people like me who are just stupid enough to go along for that time, or, really, I don't think it was about being stupid. In fact, I think it's my intelligence is a piece of what led me out of it. Like I said, I really think it's playing on the compassion and the trauma. The trauma played a big role.
Well, and it's cool too, right? I mean, to do what your teacher wants in college, and follow the crowd, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And you feel good. And, I talked with a professor, Hamamoto. He might be someone people are interested in looking into too. He's just an interesting guy, but he was the one who pointed out to me, well, maybe they offered you some power, and maybe they offered you some leadership roles, and maybe that played to your ego. And I looked back and I thought, wow, that is exactly what they did. They said, oh, hey, we need you to lead this group, and we need you to hold the megaphone and do this chant, and we need you to organize this part of the protest. And, oh, now we need you to tell your story. Oh, now my story is important. Now finally someone's going to listen to what happened to me. And there's really so many of us who are so broken and really need more love and attention that we were ever given. And this is what all cults and all group thinks and all sorts of organizations like this play on is the broken parts of you that are needing that group membership and that recognition, and that celebration of who you are. But it's sad because it really wasn't that. Because if it was a celebration of who I am, and what I was, then it wouldn't have asked me to do things that aren't really good for me or other people, which did happen sometimes. But again, I luckily have something inside of me, both spiritual and mental, that is strong enough that drew attention to those moments and really led me out again.
All right. Could you tell us about your moment of realization? When did you first realize you were on the
wrong path?
You were in the shadows, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, at least as far as communism goes, it was when I found out that in a communist state, you're not allowed to have a religion. And I always point out, like, a part of me was kind of okay with that. A part of me at the time was broken enough to think that was okay because religions were so musty and outdated, and the churches just had abused people and all of these things that we're told about the church and whatever crimes have happened over the centuries. And I'm not saying there weren't crimes and aren't crimes, but it really, I have a new understanding about even that. But at the time, I was still kind of convoluted enough inside to think, yeah, it's okay if we don't have churches, people will just still have their own spiritual communities in other ways. And then I found out, no, you're not allowed to have spirituality either. And I was like, wait, how could you not have spirituality? I mean, there's one thing that's been true my whole life, and it's that I know for sure one thing, and that's that I'm a soul, a very special created soul. And that is beyond doubt within me. So I couldn't understand how you could even pretend that that's something that wouldn't be allowed. How could you disallow someone from having a spiritual connection to their God, their creator, their world, or themselves? And that's when I really saw like how evil this organization was, because I just really didn't understand that before, that they would be willing. Because I said to them, well, then what do you do? What do you do when someone is spiritual? Because that's going to happen. Absolutely. You know that going into this. And they said, oh, we re-educate them. And by re-educate them, they mean we take them away and we desensitize them and we regale them with what we see as the truth until they are broken and agree with us.
Well, I think in their world, your God should be the people in power.
Oh, there is no God. I mean, they are really materialist
you know what I mean? Like
people.
the main your maker, or your higher power should just be the
state.
The state, right?
Yeah, the state, or maybe even more aptly the what would they call the proletariat? The people. Which is supposedly the state in a communist state, but really isn't. There's really just a centralized core of power.
All right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
Is there any proof that socialism leads to communism?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'd say at the very least, we can point out that socialism is a continuing concentration of power, and that communism is the epitome of concentration of power. So whether or not it directly leads to it, you can see how it is on the same spectrum. And it's really hard once power is concentrated to decentralize it again. So just logically, we can see that once you centralize and start centralizing and go further and further towards centralization, it's going to be harder and harder to get away from.
All right. So that would also include, I suppose, you're eliminating spirituality. Like if you were a white witch and you just sat around your house lighting candles and saying prayers to protect the people around you with protection spells or whatever, that'd be banned too, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Yep. Anything that they would see as non-material or metaphysical in any way would be completely outlawed.
Do you feel as if this is something that America is really going to have to face moving forward, like a move to communism? I mean, that seems almost ridiculous to say out loud.
It does feel that way, doesn't it? It's definitely, so the words might change, right? And this is part of why I don't love words. I'm an English major and an author of 5 books, and I don't love words because they're so they're so incapable actually of describing things. So they might not call it communism, but if we look at all of the tenets of communism, that's what they want and that's what they're headed towards. So they might, I don't know, I don't even know if they'll call it technocracy. What will they label it as? But it will still be materialism over all else, an absolute rejection of anything immaterial or philosophical, or I shouldn't even say philosophical, but metaphysical at least, right? Anything spiritual is rejected completely, and a super reliance on the material, and especially to the extent that it involves technocracy and the technological. We're really meant to worship technology and the state together.
Oh, that's scary.
It is, yes.
So
again, like my connection to my own understanding of my soul and its connection to what I think of as God, my God, that is what led me out of this. And I think that that's going to be true for us as individuals, no matter what comes. And I think it's going to be true for us as a society as well. If we can stay in connection with what is spiritually true for us, then that is one of our powers.
All right. Now, we hear a lot in this country from the mainstream media about how certain races are suppressed, right, in this country.
Yeah.
And I mean, I tend to argue. I mean, I think we've come a long way, from the old days of slave owning and things like that. I think the people have come a long way. I remember when the Twin Towers had happened, when the attack on 9/11 happened, it didn't seem like we had much difference between us all, right? Like we all kind of came together. It didn't matter what color you were or anything. Like it just seems like that was 20 years ago, and we were so divided now as a country. Do you think that has been engineered?
Absolutely. I talk about this a lot because in the 90s, I don't I don't remember a lot of racism, and I'll admit my skin looks white, so maybe somebody would call that my
Privilege.
Oh my God, I can't. Thank you, my privilege. But I have, a lot of friends who even grew up in much more communities of color and mixed, through all sorts of cultures and ethnicities, and they had the same experience. Like, no, there really wasn't a lot. I mean, there's always the idiot who, for whatever reason, hates a group of people, whether it's for their religion or their color or anything else. So yeah, that's always been there. But nothing like this at all. And to pretend like this is just suddenly new, that's what's weird for me. Because when I was a child, we learned about, slavery and how horrible it was. We learned about the civil rights movement. Like we had these, high ideals that you treat people according to who they are and not, how they look. And all of these things were known. There was nothing hidden about it. And then all of a sudden we're pretending like this is just new. Like we just discovered that slavery existed, and I'm so confused about it. And people will argue with me and say things like, well, you don't understand. People of color can't get IDs. And I'm like, I think you're the racist. Have you talked to people of color? Because I don't know any of them without an ID. I'm not really sure where this is coming from. And then they're telling me, oh, you just don't understand. You don't understand oppression and privilege. And I'm like, oh no, I was a communist. This was like our bread and butter. Like this is all we talked about, was exactly your talking points here. That was almost 20 years ago. This is not new, but it's new for them. It's new for a lot of people because it's been publicized and put on the media, and it's been, put out in the brainwaves, and now everybody is mind controlled, apparently.
Well, it's all about the television, right?
Yes.
Television. I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, Project Mockingbird, it goes back to, the CIA has been using the TV to pretty much program people for, coming up on what, 80 years, 70 years, something like that now, since we've had TVs. I mean, I'm not a TV nut. I can't tell you when the first TV came out, but I'm thinking it was what, the 50s?
Yeah.
70
it was somewhere
years ago or so.
Seriously, that long? Yes.
That's a long time to brainwash a people.
And I think people, it's another one of those things that people don't realize how nuanced and how advanced that really is, right? Because we know that the state of wavelength your brain goes into when you're watching TV is that of like a comatose person practically, right? And this is also a state at which you're highly suggestible. But I almost wonder too, like how finely have they pinpointed, if we flash this color at this rate and then that thing and then this image comes in, like, you know what I mean? Like how well do they have our psychology really figured out so that they can maybe literally control exactly what you think about something?
Yeah, I mean, we see it every day. I mean, I've been watching this Kyle Rittenhouse trial during the day, and honestly, all this time since that case happened, I never knew that his father lived there. Right? Like
Right.
the media made it seem like he was just showing up at this town,
Yes.
for no other reason than he was just, showing up at this town to, with his buddies or whatever, looking for trouble. It wasn't the case at all. He knew people in that town, and his father lived in that town. He was probably in that town, half his life.
And then nobody knew that the people he shot in self-defense were not Black.
Yeah,
They were white. Not only were they white, one of them was a literal pedophile, multiple repeat offender.
11 times with 11,
11,
11 boys.
11 different children. And he had just left the mental hospital or whatnot, whatever his containment system was. He was still carrying the bag, which they dispatch you with, with a little toothbrush or whatever. That's literally how freshly out of that hell he had been. Like he just walked out of that and into this riot and then started attacking this young boy.
All right. So what we've really learned so far is that the mainstream media and I guess a lot of politicians are pushing this agenda to try to turn us into a socialist country, right? Or they're at least trying to keep us divided, because divided we are weak. They're not worried about the American people or what they're doing to the American people if we're divided, right? So it's kind of like just a divide and conquer strategy, don't you think?
Yes, definitely divide and conquer is their favorite tool. The further centralization of power, the further erosion of our rights, the further erosion of our ability to stand up for ourselves and speak truth. All of these things are ongoing assaults upon us by this psychopath class.
All right. I'm reading the comments here, and I'm not gonna let. I guess what I'm trying to say is try to be respectful in the comments. I mean, I'm not a racist because I disagree with turning us into a socialist country. I mean, that's ridiculous. And if you think that, then that's just, I'm not going to let you comment. That's really all there is to it. So, I mean, this leads to basically where we're going is that we're going to a deep state controlled system, right? Like we've heard a lot about it, right? The deep state.
Yes.
You and I spoke a little bit off of the air. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my cat. He's attacking my plants, and I can't do anything about it because I'm doing the show.
Oh no, that's why he's doing it. He's totally like, haha, you're busy.
He's totally taking advantage of the fact that I'm stuck here. So he's attacking my plants that I brought in, and it's really annoying me. But we talked a little bit off the air, and you thought that there was something even higher up than that controlling everything, right?
Right. And I can't be sure what that is. Is it aliens? Is it sort of a more interdimensional type of what we might call aliens or demons, in other words? Or even sometimes I wonder if it is AI controlling things. There's a fabulous graphic novel called V for Vendetta. It was made into a movie popularly not that long ago. And it was written by a magician named Alan Moore. He is a magician. He calls himself a magician. And in this V for Vendetta, basically what's happening now is happening. There's a virus. There's a cure that has been released for people that makes them quite ill and kills many. And a superhero emerges and of sorts. And the story goes on. Well, the leaders of this society in this story get their orders from AI, from a machine. And in fact, the lead head, whatever he is, chancellor or something, he's in love with the AI. He's fascinated with and literally physically, romantically in love with the machine. And it's just interesting for me to think, how possible is it? We know a lot of these upper psychopath class people and politicians and world figures are occultists and maybe Satanists, and perhaps what they are interacting with. And, they've even talked about how they're calling into this dimension other entities and energies from other dimensions through things like CERN and magical practices. And maybe what they've called in is inhabiting something as vast as, the internet or computers or a really large array of networks connected, and that we call it AI. And they think of it as AI, but perhaps it's akin to all of that. Maybe it's all one sort of phenomenon, actually.
All right. So what are the chances that the deep state's working with an alien entity?
I would say, especially if you allow for the possibility that alien is demonic or AI, then it's pretty high.
Okay. So
they talk about it themselves.
It could be demonic then.
Yeah.
What do you think it is?
I think the easiest thing to call it is demonic. But the problem with that is people then kind of trap it in this like Christian only point of view, when the truth is that every religion and every culture has what we would call demons, but they just have different names, like the jinn and other things. And so, it's a good word because it comes closer to what I think the truth is, which is that this is a non-corporeal, extremely ancient, extremely intelligent entity and consciousness that had to be summoned and invited into this dimension.
How long do you think it's been here?
I still think it's probably not fully here in the way it would like to be. I think that's why we still have things ongoing like CERN and other seemingly highly charged summoning, ceremonial, sacrificial, occult events and things like that. It's either that or they're just trying to get even more of that type of being here.
Well, that's scary.
Yeah, it's definitely not reassuring. Here's what I always like to point out, though, anytime we're talking about this subject, is that as much darkness as we see and as much as these absolute psychopaths are doing all of this horrible work in the world, there are far more people who are good. There are far more beings of light and energy that you might call angels than there are anything else. And so, especially if anyone out there is feeling insecure or scared, I would just feel free to call on God or angels or whatever you believe is good. And they're happy to come be with you and protect you.
Yeah. And that's the main takeaway, really, is that this is good versus evil.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to be religious.
Yes.
You don't have to be a religious person to understand the difference between good and evil.
No, you can feel it. All of us have had experiences where we've encountered something that was dark energy, bad energy, negative, evil, people, whatever it is. And we've got that, pit in our stomach, or just that hairs stand up on our neck, or something happens where we're like, I don't like this. This feels bad. That's evil. That's darkness. We've all had the opposite, where we encounter a person or a place or whatever, and we feel, wow, so relaxed, and I feel so refreshed. I feel so good. That's goodness. And we all have the ability to distinguish between it. We all know those things exist. Whatever words you want to use to describe good and evil, they're there, and you know it. You've experienced it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. So let me throw this out there for people who might think that they're caught up in the I guess the evil, and they're in the shadows, and you think that perhaps maybe you're too far gone to come into the light. What advice would you be able to give them to be able to cast themselves out of the shadows?
I would absolutely call on, again, whatever your conception is of good. So if it is angels or angelic, or maybe it's, I really doesn't matter. Whatever your concept, that you know there's something good in the universe. So whatever that is to you, whatever you call it, maybe you call it love, maybe you call it source, maybe you call it God, maybe you call it angels, and just call them like out loud if you want to, or just in your heart, in your mind if you want to, and just say, please help me. Please, whatever way you can, reach out to me, connect with me. I would love your protection, your assistance. I mean, you can call that prayer if you want. You can just call it talking to your, what you know is good in the universe. You know it's listening all of the time. And in fact, it's probably waiting for you to do exactly that. There is a spiritual law of consent. And if you haven't asked and you haven't invited, it can't necessarily come. So try it and do it. And if you really want to go a step further, I'm a big fan of inviting Jesus into your heart and your life. I'm not necessarily what most people would call a Christian at all. I'm a Christian shaman, if anything. But I know that works, having done it before in a very dark and evil part of my own life, where I probably believed that I was too far gone and too far in the darkness to come back out. So I always invite anyone to call on Jesus, even if you're not a Christian, even if you never want anything to do with Christianity. Jesus would still be down to come help you.
Yeah, I mean, it can't hurt, right?
Can't hurt.
Yeah,
It can't hurt. It might help a lot.
Not at all. And as Chuck Bam points out here, God has many names. So it's not just a Jesus as far as religion. I'm sure that there's a ton of religions out there that are in the light as well, right? It's not just Christianity that's in the light. There's a lot of religions out there that are in the light.
Yeah, I mean, that's like going back to my thing about I don't really like words and labels because they don't really work. And again, you could feel the difference between good and evil. So it doesn't matter where it's coming from, right? For example, I really love Guan Yin. Guan Yin is from the Buddhist and Eastern traditions. In Guan Yin, you could do the same thing. Ask Guan Yin to come into your heart and your life. And she is the goddess of compassion and love. And she's happy to come be with you. So you could go into any sort of tradition you want. When you really start to look at all the world traditions, they start to blend together pretty well. They all have the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated. They all have the same sort of precepts and the same sort of organization and they give the same advice. So there's a reason why it's universal, that there is good, there is evil, that there are entities and energies on both sides. And you can hook up with it, whichever ones feel good to you.
I think that people that are truly spiritual would attest to the fact that there is evil in the world. That obviously, they know there is as well. Even just being spiritual.
It gets kind of weird sometimes when people who claim to be very spiritual pretend there is not evil in the world. I get confused, and there's sort of a weird new age idea that if you see it and acknowledge it, you're like inviting it in, or you're helping to create it, or that that you should keep your vibe so high that you don't even like look at those things, and that's not part of your reality. And I call that denial. I don't think it's healthy. I think it's much healthier to say, yeah, you know what? There's some really dark stuff out there, like pedophiles and pedophilia and human trafficking. And I'm not going to pretend that doesn't exist. I don't think that helps good win. I think it helps evil win when we don't look at the truth and acknowledge the truth and admit it. I think most spiritual people understand this, but there's always this weird new age component that seems really, really bent on not acknowledging any kind of darkness or evil.
Well, you said the words I wasn't going to go near, so let me say one that I would normally avoid as well. Let's talk about that achrome, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Is that do you think that that's a real thing?
Yes. It's mentioned in most traditions as an evil black magic sort of substance. It's sometimes called starfire. And it's used in, again, many dark black magic ceremonies and rituals. So I do think that it's very real. And I don't think any of those black magic dark traditions ever stopped, just like those of the light never stopped. It's very occulted and hidden. And it's interesting that we know about it now. I'm pretty proud of humanity for uncovering that and releasing it to the general public, because it's one of the darkest.
Johnny Depp spoke about it in Fear and Loathing on Las Vegas, and nobody seemed to bat an eye or care.
They probably didn't. Probably most people watching that were so high they didn't even notice.
Yeah. Well, that is so beyond evil.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even comprehend. What is the possibility that this stuff will come out soon in mainstream society?
It's hard, because we're at the forefront. All of us here, anyone who's listening to this and who knows what we're talking about, is at the forefront of this wave. And we're the people who can handle it. We're the people who can look at the darkness and acknowledge that it exists and see it for what it is and not run away. And that's a really powerful, necessary, needed faction of people in the world. Because the rest of the people who are right behind us, they are more like those sort of new age people who ignore the darkness because they're living in denial. And I had this experience not that long ago with some people who are close to me, and I was talking to them about the border situation, and they were saying, a border shouldn't exist, and these people just need help, and we should just let them across, and all this. And I said, I know, I totally agree. In a perfect, Edenic world, we would not have borders, and that'd be beautiful, and we would just be humans together. And in a perfect world, people who needed help would just get it no matter what. And that's not the world we live in. And when you let just anyone across the border, they are taking children with them that are not their children, and they're taking them across to be sold into sex slavery. And the people I was talking with suddenly were like, oh, that's just so dark. That's just so, like pessimistic and cynical. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, you have to know that's happening, right? And they were like, well, like they were willing to admit that it must happen, but then they wanted to change the subject and never talk about it again. Like they can't imagine the darkness, and they can't imagine how evil, and they don't want to acknowledge that exists because it hurts so bad to know for sure that this is happening. And so those of us who can look at that and say, yes, this is happening, and therefore we need to stop it, we're really, really doing a service to all of humanity. And eventually other people have to start to wake up from that and start to deal with that pain and start to acknowledge the truth that does hurt so bad. But for now, there's so many people who literally cannot handle it. They cannot deal with it.
Yeah, there was a post on the back channel that referred to not everyone will be able to handle and stomach the truth of how evil is.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like yes. Not. I mean, it's so bad that if we all shined flashlights on it, people would lose their shit.
Yeah, it'd be like that. It was like a Twilight Zone episode or something where like the one word whispered in people's ears just instantly drove them insane. Like, it's just really, it's too much for people to deal with. And a lot of times I think it's because people have children. It's interesting, like the people who will have children will say, oh, I don't even want to talk about it. I can't even think about it because I have kids. And then other people who have children are like, oh, I'm on a war path now. Like I have kids. I need to protect them, So it's just interesting to see the different ways people react to seeing evil. But denial seems to be the number one response.
Let me talk to you a little bit about cloning and I guess not only cloning, but I can't think of the word, but like when you mix like a human and a pig or a,
oh yeah, chimera.
Yeah, right. What's the word I'm thinking of? Somebody
genetic.
Genetic manipulation or yes. Any of that kind of stuff. Where I've listened to some shows where they've talked about these underground facilities where they're actually doing this on a massive scale. you know, and this comes into the whole uh, alien abduction phenomena and the hybridization programs and all of that stuff. The Ian myself says cross species pollination. I think that's for more like animal human hybrids. I guess AJK said. Um, what do you think of that? Do you think that that's actually going on? That there's these I mean, I think there is, right? There's got to be. How could they not be doing stuff like this? I mean, they're making viruses and germs to wipe out entire human populations. I mean, with gain of function research, I mean, when we know that's happening, you know. I mean,
Yes.
how could they? I mean, what else are they doing?
Yeah, well, we know. I mean, there's declassified documents that prove that they work with cloning and genetic editing and all of this stuff going back for so long. You know, the original cloning was done with literally a hair that would just slice in half the cell and to divide it into two and create a clone. And this is back, I don't even know, was that like 1940s or something? You know, like a long time ago. And if we want to go back even further than that, thousands of years ago, we see all of this seeming evidence that there were chimeras being created back then, and that this was an atrocity upon God's creation, and that this is what some of the like Nephilim, and giants and the race of fallen were doing was just messing with creation and just doing whatever they wanted with it, making of themselves pseudo gods. And so I feel like these people who are the psychopath class today are being run by the same sort of motivations and programs. And I mean, they do the same sorts of worshiping. They drink their starfire still. And they're doing all of this dark black magic in the same vein. So I don't see how they could have stopped, and why they wouldn't go right back to where they were back then. And then we have Plum Island, and these sorts of places and some weird stories around Plum Island where there was weird human dolphin hybrids found on the beach and all kinds of stuff, genetic manipulation and things. And that, again, was many, many decades ago. So if that was way back then, who knows what they're doing now? And especially in these deep underground military bases with all of this black ops money and all the money that disappeared on the day that 2 different towers fell. I don't know what we call that here on the show.
You're talking about underneath Building 7.
Yeah, and all sorts of money disappeared. All sorts of money disappeared the day before even. And yeah, all that money goes into these types of programs and who knows what else. Technological programs and CERN-like programs and all sorts of things, mind control programs. So I am sure, I don't have the physical proof, but I'm sure they're still messing with things like that today.
All right. We had a guest on the show. I guess it's been a little while, probably a few months since we had her on, talk about how she was abducted in a craft of some kind, and they were actually doing satanic rituals on the craft, and how strange it was that aliens in a UFO from another planet would be doing satanic rituals. That's not going to happen. So do you think that these elite, I guess, evil people are in possession of I guess, futuristic craft?
Yeah, it seems really likely to me that what is happening in abductions is most likely more akin to sort of like astral travel most of the time. And that when it's not, it's more likely what they call military abductions, MILABs, and that they're abducting humans physically, but that they're doing it with really advanced technologies and craft. And that maybe there are other beings, maybe they're even chimera that have been genetically manipulated by humans, or maybe they're physical aliens from afar, although that's really honestly the least likely, given so many things. It could be though, right? It could be any of those things, but it seems most likely to me that the military, and people have said, in many of these abduction cases that they see military brass there giving directions and doing things like this. And if the psychopath class is in as much control as we think they might be, I don't know why they wouldn't be abducting people and doing satanic rituals with them.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Have you had any demonic encounters?
Yes, many.
What could you, I guess so. What could you tell us?
Well, one, the first one was actually the one that really changed everything for me. And it was when I was pretty young, maybe about 16 or so. And I had been dabbling in tarot. And in my tarot readings, the reading I was first given by a girl was, the way she did it was to invite in a spirit to guide the reading. And I continued doing that because I learned it from her. And I started experiencing poltergeist activity and all kinds of strange things in my life. And I was given really good tarot readings, like really accurate readings that were blowing people's minds. And all of this also was coinciding with sleep paralysis. And that was all a little bit worrisome, but I also didn't know what to do about any of it. And I just kind of explained a lot of it away, especially the poltergeist activity. I just told myself like, oh, there was a breeze, or like there's just something I can't understand, happened. And that's why this object flew off the table in front of me. And I don't know. I just explained it away because it was easier. I was living in denial. And so this culminated in one sleep paralysis event. Prior to this event, I actually was sitting at my computer, and my dog was sitting under my desk with me. And I felt this presence, again, going back to that, how we can all sort of feel this, good and evil. And I felt this person staring at me behind me, but I was alone in my house. So I kept looking behind me thinking like, this is such a weird feeling that no one's there. But I just swear, like I'm just feeling like someone is. No one's there. No one's there. It's like seems to be getting stronger and closer. And it feels like pretty bad now. It's not just someone staring at me. It's like someone maybe wanting to stab me in the back or so, like not good. And my dog was sleeping under me, like I said, and he woke up and got up and started growling at the space behind me. And I always have to point out that this dog had literally, very literally never growled in his life. And he was many years, he was maybe 12 years old or something. He was an older dog. I had not once ever in any situation heard him growl. And he started growling at the exact spot where I was feeling this malevolent energy coming from behind me. So that broke me. I really, I got up and I ran to my bed and I hid under the covers because I was, now there really is, there's something behind. My dog even knows there's something in this house with me. Like my dog does not act this way. So it scared both of us. And I went to sleep, and within a few nights of that occurring, I had my final sleep paralysis episode, in which this time things were different. I wasn't just paralyzed and asleep in my body. I could suddenly see my whole room, even though my eyes were closed and I was asleep. And so this was one of my first out-of-body experiences, but I didn't know that at the time. I just knew it was very weird that I could see all of my bedroom, even though my eyes weren't open. And I was really confused. I was still paralyzed. I still couldn't do anything. But I could see everything. And then I started getting that same feeling, like something was coming or staring at me or wishing me ill. And then it was coming closer, and then it was coming closer. And then it came through my door, and I could see it now because, as I didn't know then, but know now, I was in sort of astral space, and you can see incorporeal entities, demons, angels, and all sorts of things in that space. And so I saw it come through the door as a black mass of swirling emptiness, which is terrifying. And it terrified me. And I knew it was the same thing. And I sort of started putting together all these things were moving around my house, and all this stuff was happening, and the sleep paralysis, and like all of it was really just one thing. And my dog in real life started scratching at the door, and I could hear him, and so I knew again that this was really happening in real life, even though I was also asleep and paralyzed. And this entity came closer into the room. And this happened pretty quickly, actually, but it actually turned into a little girl shape. Like it morphed down into the shape of a little girl, and it was glowing, bright, sparkly, like yellow light. And suddenly I thought, oh, it's just a ghost. Like, this is just the ghost of a little girl who's died, and she, maybe needs to get to heaven or something, like whatever this is. I'm a young kid. I don't really know what's going on. And this is my best guess. And then I felt sort of honored. I was like, oh, this little girl ghost like came to me, like I'm maybe special. Like, I can help ghosts go to heaven. And so I just look back and I see all these little tricks, that were played. It turned into a little girl because I'm a woman and I love kids and I want to protect them. And then it played on my ego and my vanity to, make me feel as though I could help ghosts go to heaven or whatever that, thought was. And it's just very tricky, and it knew everything that I loved and everything that I knew just as well as I knew it, which is also terrifying. And I heard then, luckily, in my head, from inside of myself, a very clear voice saying very matter-of-factly and sternly, that's just what it wants you to think. And then I understood that it was just, I saw really the blackness was still all around the glowing figure. So it couldn't really hide its aura. It just could create an image sort of in front of its aura, so to speak. And I realized it really was still just a demonic energy or an evil energy, and that it was just as scary as it had been when it was behind me wishing me ill. And it was just as scary as when I had first come through the door, and that this was all a trick. And it also heard that and understood what I was thinking. And it started to leap towards me. And then I realized just how screwed I was. And I didn't know what to do. And so I said, "Dear God, please help me." And just then a sort of shield of energy appeared around me. It was sort of like silvery but see-through in my vision. And it hit that. It literally ran into it physically. And when it did so, it was very, very angry, it seems, because it made a sound that I could hear in that space that sounded like crashing metal and percussive drums and lightning striking and buildings exploding and people screaming all mashed into one somehow, as though it was screaming that at me. And I just kept repeating, "Dear God, help me, dear God, help me, dear God, help me." And finally, I was able to move my pinky and able to wake up and get up. And I ran from that room and into my mom's room and got into my bed with my mom. So my bed was no longer safe enough, but somehow my mom's bed was going to be safe enough. And I just spent the rest of the night seeing really dark visions of things that I could never have imagined if I tried, of things that I would never even want to describe to anyone because they're so gruesome and horrible. So this thing had some sort of an effect on me, even with that shield that had appeared when I called on God. And so that was disturbing as well. I went to school the next morning and I was in a pretty bad shape, but I had been in worse because, again, I had had a lot of drug abuse issues. And so people had seen me in some pretty, nasty, like strung out and just horrible states. And so it was surprising then when people saw me that morning for the first time ever, no matter how messed up they had seen me before, they said, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And like, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" And like, "Whoa, like, what's wrong with you? What's going on?" And by the time the third person did this to me, I like broke. I was like, wow, I'm not that. Before this, I was kind of thinking I was just crazy and I was breaking down and needed to go to a mental hospital. But once other people were saying this to me, again, after having seen me in some of the worst states you could be in as a human, that meant to me that they saw something, right? This is another confirmation, just like my dog growling at the spot that felt dark. So I realized it wasn't just me. I wasn't just crazy. It wasn't just a weird, bad dream or a hallucination, but something had actually happened. And so to conclude, I called the only people I knew who could even remotely help, as far as I knew, because they were the only people who had ever said to me that perhaps there were dark entities or energies in the world. And it was this very, very Christian fundamentalist family that I knew. And so I called them from school and I asked them if I could come over. And they said, of course, because they had probably been waiting because they knew I did tarot cards and they really didn't like that. And so They probably had an inkling of what was going on, but I went over to their house and I told them what had happened. And they said, oh yeah, just very matter of factly, like, yeah, you've had a demonic attack. And I was like, well, okay. I mean, if that's true, like, what do we do about it? Because I cannot do this again. I can't go through this again. Like, this was the worst, most terrifying thing that's ever happened to me. And they were like, oh, it's really easy. You just pray for Jesus to come into your heart. I'm like, that sounds really easy. Let's do it right now. And so we did. And I always explain this too, that as soon as I said the words like, dear Jesus, please come into my heart, my life, literally from head to toe, I just filled with peace. Instant peace. And I didn't even know how not peaceful I was, and how distraught and how broken and how attacked and how surrounded by this dark energy that was really affecting me. I had no idea how bad it had become until I said that prayer and felt that peace. And that blew my mind. I was like, wow, this is all real. Like, that really happened.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. And I went pretty far into the fundamentalist Christian pathway for a while. I burned my tarot cards to continue getting rid of the connection I had to this demon. And I did all these things, and they were all good in the end. But I did come back to some balance and to really see that, like, yes, Jesus is awesome, and God is awesome, and this is awesome. And there's also many, many other awesome things out there, and they can all be very helpful and beautiful. And I do tarot readings again, but I do it in a protected way now, and in alignment with source and love and life affirming energies, and not with random spirits without, delineating which.
Would you consider that ability to be an empathic ability?
Yeah, I do think that I've always had a sort of empathic connection and sort of knowings, and maybe psychic or all kinds of sort of abilities that people might say exist. And I think that that's even part of why, when I did tarot readings and when I invited a spirit in, it ended up that bad. Because I think that the dark forces and the light forces both know who is a sort of channel or portal, or however you want to describe that, who has more potential and who has less. And so when they see...
I'm going to interrupt you because it's interesting you said that, because I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said that the more powerful an empath is, the more attacks that they'll get starting at a young age to try to bury that, to try to cover that up with PTSD and trauma and all kinds of stuff from childhood on, to try to keep that suppressed. What would you say to that? I mean, you think that that's true?
I think that's absolutely it. I think that is the purpose for traumatizing children in many cases. When we look at mind control and the programs that they have to mind control, they often involve trauma, and they often involve hand-selected children that are not selected by accident, and they often have a wider channel or a deeper connection to source, or are more empathic, or however you want to describe that. And I definitely, myself being a channel and a strong spiritual worker, I have experienced just countless demonic attacks. That was just the first. And that was one that I stupidly invited. And the others have gotten more and more nuanced, and I've learned more and more how to protect myself. And that's also part of why I do that work with other people, helping them learn how to protect themselves.
All right. Let's talk to you guys now. I guess we're coming up on the last half hour of the show. Give a thumbs up if you haven't already. It does help the show with the algorithm. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you know when we go live, because we offer I guess an interesting show here where it's now your guys' turn to ask the guest questions. So if you have a question for Lindsey, put it in the cat box and we'll get to it. So why don't you guys go ahead with that, and I'll continue on with my question here, and that is basically what you just said, is that if you have a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, even maybe even younger, that is highly into I guess, empathic ways that those entities would then start attacking that child. Is that true? I mean, is
I
that
think, yeah, I think when they're that young, it's a lot. They don't have a
it's
real
too
direct
young, really?
access.
But you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Well, I think they'll use humans to do it because they can't really. There are some spiritual rules, and like we said, consent is one of them, and children don't have the ability to consent, and so there is like a spiritual protection that they come in with, and it starts to fade more and more after the age of 7 or so, and then they get more and more of their own self will and self reliance, and so it's more and more capable of for the darkness or the light to come in to connection with them at that point. But there is sort of a protection before them, but who can break that is other humans. And so if other humans are possessed or affected or attached to dark energies, they will go in and harm the children on behalf of or in service of these dark entities.
All right, so here we go. The questions are coming. Hey, would you be well, I guess I'm not going to ask that question because I'm not set up for that today. Let's Vash has just an observation here. He said guest had to experience the bad, evil, and acknowledge before she could be free. Would you say that that's kind of true?
I do think there's almost like a training involved in it, and that I am more free now that I see both sides very completely and have chosen, because more so than even that, I've had to very, very clearly know my own heart and choose my path very clearly over and over again in order to stay on it. And I think that that's exceptionally valuable.
All right. He's got a question here. I'm going to get to it in just a second. I do want to ask you if there is anybody listening to the show that was a child or a kid or a young adult or however old you were, where you felt like you'd been attacked and attacked and attacked by the evil entities through people or through experiences or whatever, what would be the best way for them to cast aside their PTSD and to become more full?
There's so many ways. PTSD is a complex one. I suffer from complex PTSD myself. And for me, what was the best was doing first Jungian psychotherapy and then PTSD therapy, especially EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization. And but the core of that, anybody could do if you're clever and you're committed and you've got your spiritual allies of light around you and you've invited them in and cast out the darkness, which anyone can do just by saying so and knowing so. Then you can also choose to go back to the moments of trauma where they started and relive them. And in reliving them, bring that light to it, bring that pure observation to it and watch it. And you can even tell yourself in those moments, as you are now, going almost like time traveling back, and you can tell yourself then, you're safe, you're loved, you're protected always. Look, you made it. Here I am. We're still here. And what you're trying to do, which is what you're doing in EMDR and PTSD therapy, is go back to that moment and restructure it to a way that makes sense to your brain. Because what PTSD really is your brain is sort of almost breaking under the pressure. It can't handle it. And so it breaks it all up into a bunch of random sensory inputs that are not connected. And that's why you have flashbacks that can be triggered by any one of those sensory inputs that are disconnected. And so you're really going back in and bringing it back together into a cohesive whole. And if you can observe it from start to finish and stay present and send love at it that whole time, you often can accomplish what years of therapy would do just on your own. And then I'd also just offer that I do things like spiritual ceremony for people that often accomplish the same thing. And we just call it soul retrieval, where you bring back those shattered pieces and you put them back together. So any of those options might work for people.
Do you think the soul is actually fragmented?
I do think that a piece of your soul is left in denial and darkness. It can't actually break. It can't actually fragment, but it can be left in the space of not being accepted by your consciousness. And so it's not feeling whole. Really, when it comes down to it, you can't reject any part of yourself. You can't live in self-rejection. So when you've cut off a piece of you, a piece of your soul, and left it in the darkness, it's still attached to you. And now there's like a festering hole. And sorry to say, but demons and dark energies love those little holes to hide in. So it's really, you need your integrity. You need to pull your soul back together, and you need to be able to observe all of it and give love and acceptance to all of it, so that nothing can attach to you. You have a nice, smooth soul where there's no holes or fractures.
All right. Johnny Dazzle says he has no comment. He just wants to use an emoji. And I just wanted to throw that up there so everybody can see that he failed.
Oh.
Vash Wolfwood has a question. Can a guest talk about any books she would recommend reading or some of her favorites?
I have so many, but I always have to throw out The Neverending Story because it's my favorite book of all. And that one book has the entirety of every sort of spiritual traditions, esoteric and occulted initiatory information embedded within it, just as this like nice, easy to read children's story. So it's super beautiful, and it really shows you the pathway of your own soul to healing and wholeness. It's very, very good.
All right, there you go, guys. I would avoid watching the sequel movies to that. They weren't that good.
Yeah, read the book. The movie's okay, and the sequels are trash.
All right. Not Quite Human says, what does the guest think or know of reptilians?
I have never encountered a reptilian myself. I have what I believe are abduction experiences.
That you know of.
Yeah, that I know of, exactly. But I think at the very least, there's a type of, again, entity or energy, whatever you want to call them, that are interdimensional and that show themselves as reptilians. And what that represents could be so many things. It could be like we talk about the sort of reptilian brain where you're all anger and sex and force and eating and like the lowest sort of energy. And it could be more than that. But yeah, I don't have a lot of direct experience.
All right. Sapphire Elf has the same question. What's your thoughts on reptilians? But he also says that some say evil, but I also think there's another side like the Naga.
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of remembering that whatever class of entity we're talking about, there's going to be good ones and there's going to be evil ones. And I'm also a big fan of pointing out that looks are very deceiving in this realm. If you are one of the people who can see some of these entities and energies, you'll already maybe know that some of the things that look the most terrifying are the most good. And some of the things that look the most innocuous are the most evil. Like that little girl was a demon for me, but that I've also
talking about
encountered...
that climate change girl?
Yeah, her too.
I'm just kidding.
Yes. And then I've seen, for example, a horned, giant, like burly, like kind of scary looking thing that was a really, really positive being. And so, when they describe angels in the Bible, they don't sound very friendly looking, but they're described as angels. So there's a lot of things that looks can be deceiving, and reptilians could definitely be the same.
All right. Arlene Atkinson has a question, and I'm going to tell you right now, this answer is yes. Do the attacks on empathic children ever come in the form of parents?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Very often, in fact. And it's very sad. And I'll just add too, sometimes not necessarily even because the parent is like evil or is working for demonic entities. Sometimes parents are just terrified of the empathy and the skills and the abilities their children are displaying. And so we can have a little compassion for that.
That could also come from parents who are overly religious, I would say, right? Like,
yeah, definitely.
Thinking that their empathic child is possessed, say.
Yes, that's like maybe the saddest one to watch. Mm-hmm.
All right. Sapphire Else says, I remember being a kid and playing in the woods with little green cloaked fairy people. Might have been imagination, but I smile.
I think children are so connected, they're so close to source still, and they don't have a lot of these filters that we've learned to put on. to please society. You know, when we say things like, hey, my friend is here with me, and people are like, you're crazy, that's imaginary, it's not real, like, shut up. And we learn to like start to block that out. And I think there's a lot of spiritual skills that all of us are sort of born with, or naturally have, and that we start to train ourselves out of. I think anybody can get back to and closer to those things. Some people are more skilled or gifted in that, but anyone can sort of develop their psychic skills, their aura seeing, and all these sorts of things. And those are also some of the things I teach.
All right. Antonio says, Conflict Radio official, I have had to accept what is true and what is dreams. PTSD is so different from dreams, right?
Yeah, especially when you're triggered and you're having a flashback, it's definitely not a dream. And a lot of people have this misconception of like, oh, it's all in your imagination. Like you're just, you know, experiencing things that aren't happening. But to you, when you're triggered, it is happening right now. It's happening right now, and it's happening again, and it's very real. You know, and it's hard when people don't understand and they want to put labels on things.
All right, you guys, we still got quite a few time for questions. Keep them coming if you got. Looks like I'm catching up already, and you guys need to get more questions. Vash wants to know: can Lindsey share how her relationship with her sister changed after she left her communism group? Has her sister come to the light since?
No, not even a little bit. She definitely, it wasn't even that long ago, I finally got her to take back a collection of Mao's collected writings that she had given to me as a gift many, many years ago. And I still had them. And I was like, well, I'm not a book burner. I'm a big fan of, we should keep the information out there so everyone can know, no matter if we like the information or not. And I didn't know what to do with them. I was like, I don't want to take it to a thrift store because then some other young mind will be corrupted. So I was trying to give it back to her. And she's like, no, just keep it. And I finally told her, I'm literally going to give these to a thrift store, or you can take them back. And so she finally took them back. But she's still a big fan of communism and all of the sort of woke left isms.
How does that affect your holiday gatherings?
We not that many years ago, because my brother and I tend to be sort of on the other side now, and then she's kind of on that side, and then my mom's kind of somewhere in the middle, and so we at some point had to just agree to never talk politics again.
Your mom's not in the middle; she's just not choosing sides over her.
I think you're right. She's just a very good person.
All right, Davy Jones Locker wants to know: do you think aliens are demonic?
I'll just say that was my sort of catch-all way of describing it, because it was easier, especially for so many people who just think aliens are saviors and we should just trust them and just go running into their ships or whatever. But no, I don't think all of them are. Again, I think any group of any kind is going to have good, bad, and everywhere in between. And so I think a lot of abductions are negative for a lot of people. And again, I think a lot of them are done by the military, for satanic purposes, in conjunction with demonic entities, and that some demonic entities also mimic alien abduction, and that I don't think any of those are good. And I also have now experienced interactions with what people would call aliens that are very positive and beings of goodness and the light. So hopefully that's not too convoluted of an answer.
All right. He usually asks the same question in every show, so I'm going to ask now before he puts it in there. How does Bigfoot fit into all of this?
Oh, Bigfoot's so fascinating. You know, we've seen Bigfoot in connection with especially the Greys a lot of times through a lot of people's experiences. And so it's hard to think of Bigfoot as anything but a metaphysical sort of being, to me, an interdimensional being, perhaps. And does he work for aliens or with aliens? I don't know. But here's one thing I do seem to see and have experienced myself, is that Bigfoot, or what we call Bigfoot, is a protector energy, and that Bigfoot often is protecting children. A lot of times you'll hear about children who get lost in the woods and they'll say, oh, I was carried by a big bear and they took me to their cave and I met their family and they gave me food and then took me home. Or, you know, we hear things like this a lot, especially in a lot of those missing 411 cases. And so And Bigfoot in a lot of Native traditions was known as a protector of women and children. So I think Bigfoots are often maybe a very good force.
All right. Here's a decent question here. Kin wants to know, when we die, should we go towards the light or is it a trap?
I love this question. Here's the thing I say to myself. My soul is intarnishable. It's unstoppable. It knows way more than I do. It's way wiser than I. And if my soul went to the light, then the light is where my soul should go. My soul can't be trapped. I know that for sure. I know I'm free in truth. And so if I'm here, I chose to be here. And if I came here through the light, then the light was good. That doesn't mean that I'm going to always choose to go to the light. There might be other lights off in the distance that I want to try next time. But I know that if you keep it especially true in your heart, that your soul knows best and that you trust it to go where it needs to go, and that you cannot be trapped or deceived, that you won't be trapped or deceived.
All right. Vash wants to know, what are Lindsey's thoughts on the Great Pyramid?
I am most convinced that the Great Pyramid is either a literal battery or a consciousness raising device, that was constructed by people who had a lot more understanding of cymatics and energetic flow and how to harness the ether.
Well, I think the answer to that question would be what the capstone was made out of, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have the capstone. It's gone.
Right. It does not function as it was intended to at this moment in time.
You think it was working and then somebody came and just took the capstone?
Yeah, I think there definitely seems to have been a reset, put upon us by the psychopath class, perhaps at some point to disconnect us from source and from our natural state of abundant living. And that's actually what my first novel in my series is about.
All right. Arlene Atkins Zell says, my mom, Pagan, squashed my gifts when they started emerging. What advice could you give her on how to try to, get her gifts to reemerge?
Yeah, there's a couple steps. So you can do what we were talking about of sort of meditatively going back in time to those moments and reassuring yourself, giving yourself love, observing that, and bringing some sort of whatever closure you can to that. I would also do forgiveness practice with with yourself, with your gifts themselves, and with your mother for doing that, and bring some healing in that way. And then I would just ask your gifts as though they are their own conscious soul, ensouled beings, to come back to you and to grow with you more and more, especially in ways that are good, true, and beautiful, and aligned with the light and your highest soul's purpose.
All right. Swingnut28 just says, good afternoon from Australia. So I want to give a shout out to all of the people in Australia that are listening. Man, I'm praying for you guys over here. I've actually seen reports, and I don't know if you have, Lindsey, that they're actually building camps with double fencing around them in Australia, intended for uncured people. Have you heard that? Or what do you think about what's going on in Australia right now?
It's definitely seems like the blueprint for what they would like to do around the entire world. And yes, I've seen those camps, and it's definitely time, if not past time, for Australia to really decide how they want to protect themselves against these people, because they're definitely coming for their lives. And it's not a game.
I do believe that Australia is the perfect blueprint for what they want to do to the rest of the world. And, it's unfortunate that we can't help you guys right now. Hold the line. You guys got to hold the line. Davy Jones with his Bigfoot question. I knew it was coming. All right. All right. Okay, so Sapphire wants to know, does Lindsey have any thoughts on a universal energy or consciousness that maybe we exist to be individual versions of life to observe the universe?
Yeah, I think that's one way of putting it for sure. And that universal energy or consciousness is God, right? And it is love. And it is also called the ether. And there's all these different names for this source, energy or material, if it could even be called material. And literally everything is made of that. There's nothing that's not made of that. Even evil is made of that. So however you want to organize that in your mind, everything you look at, everything you've ever seen, tasted, touched, heard, experienced in any way is some version of that. And you are observing it. So yes, I do think we are here to be observers of that. But more so than that, we have free will and consciousness for a reason. And that's so that we can choose how we would like to participate and observe in that. And I think that matters perhaps more than people realize.
All right, Antonio, I read your comment there, and I'm thinking about you, man. Vash says, what meditation techniques does Lindsey use or suggest?
Oh, there's a million that I use. Every day I have many practices I do. And on my show, Middle Path, which is every Thursday, I do some practices. And then I also do a meditation group where you can subscribe on my site and join me twice a week in guided meditations. And so you'll also get a lot of various types of meditations if you do either of those things. But one that's always good to start for anybody who would just like to start and has no real experience with it, or even for people who do, is to just sit with your breath quietly, especially in a place where you're grounded, as in literally sitting on the ground or with your shoes off and your feet on the ground outside somewhere. And to just breathe in deeply to where your belly expands and just sit with that for 1 second or 2 seconds, and then breathe out deeply all the way until the air is out. And you don't want to force it or push it, but you just want to fully breathe in and fully breathe out. And if you even just did that for 5 or 10 minutes a day, things would start to shift.
Okay. Not Quite Human wants to know, what do you think about The Cure?
I think it is either. I think it's many things at once. I think one, it's a mind controlled device. I've outlined how that would work on my show. And it's definitely seems very likely that that's part of it, at least. It also seems to be injecting people with things that do not help and in fact kill them. And so maybe it's a culling device at the same time. And it's finally just a sort of litmus test of who's going to come along with us on this evil pathway and who's not. And now we know for sure who's sort of on our side and who's not. And not to say that the people took it are evil or dark, but they're going to do what they're told. And so they're going to go along.
Yeah, I've seen some videos where there's some kind of substance in it that reacts to frequency. So that brings me to the Travis Scott concert, right?
Yeah.
Where it seemed like the frequency that was going on caused like 8 different heart attacks.
Yes. And it also maybe caused the rush in itself and the crazy behavior, right? There is a method by which, and this is far before The Cure came out, a method by which, am I allowed to say the initials of the gene editing thing? The gene editing component, I'll just say, is used to move various things around in your body, and using an electromagnetic frequency from a distance, they can then implant thoughts, implant memories, delete thoughts, delete memories, and control behavior. And this was years before The Cure ever came out, was outlined by a military official at West Point for the students there. So back then, this was known that it was possible to use those components in a conjunction to control people in such a way. So I wouldn't be surprised if people at that concert, 100% of them had The Cure. They had to get in.
That. Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they could both trigger things like heart attacks, but also trigger behavior and thoughts and memories.
Well, that'd be interesting if they actually have something where just enabling a certain frequency would cause them to drop dead.
Yes.
I mean that's almost scary to even think about.
Yeah, and I mean they describe it in their own literature and their own plans, and so
that could be some kind of crowd control device that they're setting up to use later.
Well, and think about how a lot of these people who have received it seem incapable now of thinking, even more so than before. I don't know how much of their minds are going to be left intact.
Well, let me ask you this. I've seen a couple videos as well about some kind of organic parasite that's in these things. It has legs and a head and everything else. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've seen some of those, and I don't know if they're organic or if they're constructed by what might be the graphene in there.
Yeah.
Because there also seems to be, self replicating or self creating, I guess, self assembling little bots and things. So, and it could be both. Because again, they are always working at multiple levels. There's no reason why this couldn't do many of these things at once. It doesn't have to be just one of those
That's
things.
scary shit. I'll tell you what, in my cold dead arm.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So
that's the line I have. There's absolutely no way I will die for this if needed.
Yeah. Moving on from that, Sapphire Elf says, have you had any experience with scrying devices or focuses that can help with paranormal abilities, i.e. orbs, wands, throwing bones, or religious icons?
I do tarot readings, and that's a type of, oracle device. And I do that for people. So if you want one, you can go to my site and grab one. But yeah, I just would be careful with any of those. I mean, you heard what happened with my first experience with tarot, and any of those devices can be like that. They're portals, if you want to think of it that way, and they're doors you're opening. And so if you're not very, very clear inside of yourself what you are doing and in alignment with what energies and what you're inviting in, then something will come in. Something will always come in, but you want to be the one who determines what. So if you are going to go use any of those things, just do it with your full consciousness and your full heart and your full alignment with what's good and true and beautiful and with God, or however you want to describe that highest truth and energy and goodness. Otherwise, it could go poorly for you.
All right. All right. So I'm just scrolling down here. All right. Well, a question we ask everybody before, as I'm looking here for more questions, a question we do ask every guest. Let's see if you know the answer. Do you know who Corn Pop is?
I do know who Corn Pop is.
You do? Who is Corn
Yeah,
Pop?
the Corn Pop is that horrible, horrible foe that Joe Biden had to fight off in the 60s or something, right?
He's a bad dude.
A bad dude. You had to fight him with a chain. His stories are amazing. I don't know how many times he has to be caught lying and fully racist before people realize he's a lying racist. But it's kind of amazing that the party that was so against racism elected a racist pedophile, I'll say, and a cop, a prosecutor. Like, that's very interesting choices there.
Yeah, Hank Stolk says, it would be interesting to know if the 1% are taking the cure, but even if they did, we wouldn't know if that cure was just saline, right? Well, that's true, but the CEO of one of the companies that created the cure, the big one, which starts with a P, I guess, he actually canceled his overseas trip to Israel because he needed to show proof that he took it, and he refuses to. I mean, the CEO of the company isn't doing it. That should tell you something.
And the CEO of another one flat out said, "Oh, I don't need to take it. I'm a healthy adult with no comorbidities, and I've already had it anyway." So you're like, well, then why can't the rest of us do that?
Or, these mandates that aren't laws at all. It's just a mandate. And I encourage everybody to go Google the meaning of the word mandate. Google it, seriously.
Yeah.
Understand what the actual definition of that is. All right. And
right.
And
exactly.
let me know. And it's funny how Congress and Senate and everybody else, they're exempt from that. They don't have to do that.
Yeah, there's a telling group of people who aren't getting this cure, and it's everyone at the CDC, everyone at the WHO, and all of the people in the White House. That tells you a lot.
All right. So Vash has another question here. He says, if money is an energy, can it be used for good, even if it's a tool for evil?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is a really important concept to understand, that 100% of objects and concepts are neutral. 100% of them. A gun, not good or evil. Money, not good or evil. Nothing is good or evil, and nothing that's not a consciousness, I should say, unless you then use it in that way. So you can pick up a gun and you can use it for good. You can pick up a gun and you can use it for evil. So you can do the same with money. And your belief that money is evil, if you have that belief, well, that is your choice you're making. And you're putting that now on all of your own money and your own interactions. And you're saying 100% of what you're doing is now tainted by evil. Is that really the energy you want to invite and put out into the
Hello?
Or would you rather invite money to be good, maybe even do a forgiveness practice with money and say, I'm really sorry. I always treated you as evil. You're actually neutral. I would love to work with you as a positive force. I would love to create abundance with you. I would love to share you as much as I can with people. And I'd love to create this beautiful world.
All right. Srirachi 1331 wants to know, have you ever heard of a jellyfish-looking entity 5 to 6 feet high, electric orange in color?
Not that specific, but I definitely have heard of jellyfish sort of beings, especially as sort of controllers of interdimensional, what am I trying to say, where many spaces would conjoin. So like crossroads, interdimensional crossroads. All
right. Well, I guess that's going to do it for us, everybody. Lindsey, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes. If you want to, you can go right now to my YouTube channel and subscribe. Although I don't do as much on YouTube as I do on Rockfin. Rockfin.com/rogueways is where I do 100% of my content. Most of it's free. If you also would like to support, you can. And then you get access to me and everybody else on Rockfin's content at the same time for that one price. So it's a really good deal. If you are interested more in my books or the orgone jewelry and crystal jewelry I make with blessings infused in them, or if you would like any spiritual support or help, classes, to join the meditations that we do every week, or any of that stuff is on my site at rogueways.org. And there's lots of stuff there that you can connect with, and you can even say hello in the contact section or anything else. So I would love to see you all over on the channels or on the site.
All right, awesome. And the links are in the description box below. I didn't put the link to Rockfin, but I'll probably go ahead and do it. If you guys are on Rockfin, look for Conflict Radio on Rockfin as well. We've just gotten over there. We've started to do some things and upload some old stuff, but go subscribe, because if I ever need to say something that I can't say here, I will say it over there. And I guess if anything ever happens to us here, that's where we'll be over there. So
yes,
it's all about freedom of speech over there, and that's always a good thing, right?
Yes. I love Rockfin for that reason, and again, because there's just so many creators over there that you can gain access to for that one price, instead of paying everybody separately each month and then having to pick and choose who you love most. So it's kind of nice for that reason too. I like it.
All right. And Sapphire Elf says, great guest. Please come back on the show. And hey, a couple months, maybe we can get you back on.
I will be back anytime you want me here. It's been fantastic. And your chat and your people who are listening, all the audience, you guys are awesome. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. All right. Hang on for a second, Lindsey. Let me wrap this up and I'll chat with you a little bit off the air. Remember, everybody, you can find us online. Just go to www.conflictradio.net. You can find us on Apple, iTunes, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, all of your normal podcast catchers. Check out our store. We're going to be looking to do some things on there soon to change things up. So I guess get the stuff now, because the first edition stuff's going to be gone. So if you want any of that stuff now, get it now. And I'm going to be looking to redo that whole area. So get your stuff over there now, because that stuff will be gone soon. That's going to do it for us, guys. We'll be back on Thursday. Remember, batten down the hatches and be safe.
See aircraft that were clearing. Talks about